right here on my YouTube channel. There's nobody actually watching. Okay. Right.
Then we got my shit, and we shot peas, cigarettes.
You got anything to say here?
Huh?
You got anything to say to the world in general? Huh? You've been like a broken record all night. Now you're gonna shut up. It's 2 a.m. Hey, Fritz,
Yeah,
what were you just saying?
not us.
Huh? What were you? Wait, you see this? This is like 12 hours. Hey, Fritz,
Yeah.
what's going on? You know, that's when the tax forms over there. Be careful. You ain't got a beer on that table. do you?
No,
No beer on there?
No.
Remember, you got my tax forms.
yeah, I know.
And you're live on YouTube there. So, anyway, what I was saying earlier, the unified theory actually was still being sought. Stephen Hawking pursued it before him. Einstein pursued it. Einstein came up with E equals mc squared, the theory of relativity, which is still a theory, but is still proven correct within the confines of this universe, where infinity is exactly that. Infinity. There is no. As for the universe itself, whether it's static, whether it's imploding or still exploding outwards, I think the question is more is, yes, it's still, no, actually, a static universe would mean it's stationary, which would mean it's still, this universe and nothing more than just this universe, which we would actually have to define that before we leap into the idea of other universes. But the first physical proof of an opposite, not an opposite universe, but an adjacent universe, was the fact that I believe it was matter was put into a particle accelerator, and one in Sweden. These things are like 4 miles long in there, 4 or 5 miles long in there. They're underground, and they create a vacuum, and they actually measure particles. They need this huge distance because of the fact that distance is the one thing that we can make here on Earth is distance. So, and we have the time or the velocity, whichever, and they derive the mass of the particle through a series of equations, which basically breaks down the particles into subatomic particles. And the neutrino itself is a neutral particle, which is one of the very smallest particles when it comes to mass. And this neutrino being neutral, derived from the Latin neutral, neutrino being, part of both. And 30 beers in 12 hours. You actually had 12 beers open at once. But back to the particle thing, there was an absence of one neutrino at one point. And then at another point when 2 neutrinos went into the particle accelerator, a third one had appeared. And at another test, 2 went in and only 1 appeared. So the fact that the energy, which is actually neutral, still confirms that E equals mc squared, which is energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And mass times the speed of light squared is equal to energy. So energy is equal to energy. One equals one. One equals one. And energy can either be created or destroyed within the confines of this universe, which tells us that um, where did the neutrino go and where did the other one come from? In two separate tests, and I'm sure this was just the results of the cumulative number of tests. At this point, I'm only guessing that they would do this test like maybe 100,000 times, and then come up with the average of what happens here. And what the average is that at some point a neutrino disappears. At some point on the average, one appears. And the average being the number of times that they've done it compared to the number of times they've gotten the same results. You want to take this from here? Take over from here. Talk to the computer. I gotta finish the theory here. I mean, we're in the middle of something. We're in the middle of
It's getting
something.
fucking late, though.
It's cool. I mean,
I don't finish the cigar no more.
personally, I got a headache. I need to eat, go to sleep. But here, I have a
Yeah, I'm just like
Have a
fucked up, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Real fucked up, dude.
But we're talking about we're talking about something important, the particle accelerator, and it's bearing on what we know about physical science. And basically, that's what physics is. It's just the physical science of applied mathematics to the physical world. And it was all brought about by a series of. We had Copernicus, who he was really like smart guy. He was the first one to say that we revolve around the sun instead of the sun revolving around the earth. And later, Galileo actually confirmed that by naming moons after himself. Well, one of them anyway.
Yeah.
But he could actually invented the telescope, which could actually prove that there are moons orbiting Jupiter at the time he could see 4. Now, this was like 600 years ago, and I haven't even seen one of them yet. So I forgot to clean the lens on my telescope, I think. But they say you can actually see the moons with a good pair of binoculars. And the story of Galileo is kind of sad because the church actually, Bob Dylan said it best, the geometry of innocence causes Galileo's math book to get thrown. And what he meant was the guy was innocent, but in the church's eyes, he was guilty of, going against them by basically saying that the earth revolves around the sun, as Copernicus stated, like hundreds of years before, maybe 1,000 years before. But this went against the church. And the sad part about it is he was willing to stand by his principles. And my nephew says he's sold out. And I don't think that's true. I think they had him by the boo-boo because of the simple fact that they had his daughter in a nunnery scrubbing floors. And he would never see his daughter again. And he himself would be put into a cell. So he would be separated from his daughter forever, and he would sit in a cell wondering what's going on, why is his daughter scrubbing floors in the nunnery when she's completely innocent, the geometry of innocence. It's a shame that they would go to such great lengths to protect what? Their power, their gold plates they collect money on. I mean, let's face it. I mean, they actually got people to believe that giving their last nickel is more valuable than a rich man giving $1 million. I mean, that's their idea. I mean, it sounds to me like a big ripoff idea to me. Honestly, that sounds like a trick. And they did do this. It's unfortunate that they did this. It wasn't it can't be blamed on any one religion, more about the idea of marrying religion with power and the fact that power corrupts. And it went on for a few hundred years more. There was just some bad people who were in charge. And Henry VIII actually wrote the song Green Sleeves about Anne Boleyn because of the fact that he had to have a male heir and he couldn't do it. So he had to convince himself he was right in cutting off his wife's head. Otherwise, he could not get a divorce. Eventually, he had founded the Church of England and separated from the Roman Catholic Church at that point, and this was in 1538, I believe. I'm not sure of the exact dates, but his daughter Mary took over and married King Philip of Spain, and between the two, they had decided that the Church of England was wrong, and what would later become Protestants, I believe they were called Protestants then, whatever they were called while they were being burned during the reign of Mary. King Philip of Spain and Mary, daughter of Henry Tudor, King Henry VIII, went on until Mary got sick, very sick. And they say she may or may not have died of cancer. Who knows? But the sad fact of the matter is that Mary burnt Protestants. Anyone who spoke out, and said anything different than what the Catholic Church had to say verbatim, were burned in a circus-like atmosphere at the stake for her entire reign. I'm not sure how long that was. I hope it was short for anyone's sake in England. I mean, but to accuse someone, to falsely accuse someone, you would end up burning at the stake also. And the Spanish Inquisition had happened like 100 years before that, so death by torture was not like unknown in Europe at the time. But I digress. King Henry VIII, Protestantism, which brings us to Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I. And she was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. Ironically, she was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. And she had really no major claim to the throne, except, and in fact, at one point she was actually in the Tower of London. And on her cousin Mary, who was married to King Philip of Spain, on her deathbed, she basically had to turn the throne over to Elizabeth, because of the burning was just too much for anyone. I mean, burning their neighbors. I mean, fun is fun, but there has to be a limit. And people are just saying, no, we don't need this anymore. So Mary became Queen of England, and actually the very first queen. She was known as the Virgin Queen, Good Queen Bess. And she ended the burning, absolutely, even though she promised not to. Apparently, or allegedly promised not to separate England as a separate entity from the church at that point. I guess she just promised her cousin Mary, who was dying, that she would continue punishing anyone who defied the Roman Catholic Church, and that she could not keep that promise. But she did have her other cousin Mary, who had a stronger claim to the throne than she did, and I believe it was the Earl of Gloucester was one of them that actually plotted against her. But Elizabeth was in a catch-22. I mean, she couldn't order her cousin's death because she would be killing God anointed queen, and they believed that their power actually was derived from God and blessed by God, or whatever the hell they justified the ruling. But Queen Mary was good. She was good Queen Bess for a reason. She decided she wasn't going to punish her people for their faith or what they believed, and that's monumental. And the fact that King Philip, he split all pissed off because she said, shove off, go back to Spain, and he did. And so the Spanish cut down half their forest to build the Armada, the famous Spanish Armada that they sent against England. And they weren't counting on the choppy waters of the Channel at all. The Spanish boats were big, heavy. They carried a lot of horses for their invasion of England. And actually, Jim Morrison wrote a poem called, what was that? Hey, Chris, what was that Jim Morrison poem about the horses, the Spanish, when the Armada started to catch on fire in the English Channel? They had to throw their horses into the water, and Jim Morrison was amazed by this, and later raised at the inhumanity of throwing horses into the water. My nephew can actually quote this poem word for word. I can't remember the name. I remember the name of the book that I read it in. No One Here Gets Out Alive by the autobiography of Jim Morrison. Horse Latitudes, it was called, Horse Latitudes. I'm not sure I got the name, and the poem is good. And you can look that up, Horse Latitudes, and that was actually about the Spanish Armada hitting the choppy waters of the Channel, and they could not handle the water. The English had smaller, faster boats, ships, and they went in and they sent in fire ships. I'm pretty sure Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, just to name a few, they were totally involved in this, taking down the Spanish Armada. The biggest thing was the storm that hit the Armada while it was already trying to navigate the choppy waters. And we're talking big, heavy ships, like half the goddamn Spanish forest was invested in taking England at this point. But England wasn't ready and never will be ready to get overthrown or conquered by anyone. They will remain England. And they underestimated the Channel, and the fact that a storm hit them at the same time has told the bastards to back off. And at this same point in history, Virginia was named after Mary, Elizabeth, good Queen Bess, or the Virgin Queen Virginia. And Raleigh was named after Walter Raleigh. And of course, Jamestown was founded in Virginia, 15-something. But that was founded before Mary had taken over the throne, I believe, in the 1500s. But I think she was 23 or 24 when she took the throne. And the fact that she did stand on the shores in front of her army waiting for the Armada to land. But in the movies, they actually show they could see it burning. I'm not too sure about that. But I am sure that England does stand very high at some points from the water. I mean, the highest point is, I believe, the White Cliffs of Dover. So it does stand pretty high above the water, so they would be able to get a good visual on anything happening out of there, I'm sure. But did they actually see the Armada burn? Maybe. I mean, the Channel's big, but the Atlantic is much bigger. I'm sure of that. But the waters of the Channel, along with the storm, the Spanish boats were no match for just taking the heavy boats were no match. And then England comes in with their smaller boats that, well, they're built to navigate the channel and, go out to sea through the channel. And even they could only take the channel, at certain times. I mean, even Norway crossing the channel in 1944, D-Day, June 7th, 1944, was it was a call because the Allies under Omar Bradley at the time had to decide if they didn't go then, the next crossing wouldn't be, the next safe time to cross would not be for another year. And we are fortunate that he did Eisenhower gave the order, I'm sure, but it was down to Eisenhower giving Omar Bradley the go ahead. And they had Patton stationed further down the coast. And he was they built a fake army around him because the Germans were convinced that Patton would lead the assault on Normandy at Calais, because the English Channel between where Patton was, I would have to look at a map, but between the Patton and Calais was the shortest distance across the channel. So we had to take the long route, fool Hitler. And like I said, they actually had inflatable tanks built up around Patton and fake landing craft, fake airplanes. They went as far as to, scramble fake radio messages, a lot of radio going in and out. And so the Germans being convinced already that Patton would lead the invasion, and that combined with the fact that there was absolutely. I'm just rambling here anyway. I'm gonna have to probably edit this one. I think I really went off the point. I started with the universe, ended with Normandy. Like I started out covered 4 billion years of history here. Okay, end the stream. Yes, I'm sure.